Some of the most important moments of a life arrive without any announcement at all. No warning, no preparation, just an ordinary evening that decides, without asking your permission, to become something else entirely. Thomas Brennan was 40 years old, dark-haired, built like a man who had spent years doing work that asked something real of his body, and he was standing at the entrance of Aldine, the most expensive restaurant in the city, holding the hand of his 5-year-old daughter Gracie and realizing, with a slow sinking feeling, that he had made a significant error in judgment. The reservation had been his sister's idea. She had booked it 3 weeks ago for his birthday, insisting that he deserved one proper dinner out, one evening that was not frozen pasta or a drive-through or whatever he could assemble from a refrigerator at 8:30 at night. After a long shift, she had meant it as a gift. And then her own son had come down with a fever that afternoon, and she had called Thomas at 5 to say she was so sorry she could not make it, but please go anyway. The reservation was paid for. Please just go and sit and eat something warm and quiet. Thomas had looked at Gracie. Gracie had looked at him, and here they were. The hostess was a young woman in a perfectly fitted black jacket, with her dark hair pulled into a smooth bun, and she was doing her job with professional courtesy, but her eyes had made one small involuntary trip from Thomas's blue cotton shirt to Gracie's floral dress. The nice one, the one they had agreed was a restaurant dress. And back up again. The restaurant behind her was the kind of place where the lighting cost more than Thomas's monthly grocery budget. Every table had white linen and crystal glasses and small red roses in low vases, the kind of place where the menu did not have prices. Thomas knew what she was seeing. He had known it when he pulled into the parking lot and known it when he walked through the door. And he had told himself it did not matter because his sister had paid for this, and Gracie was wearing her nice dress and it was his birthday, and they were allowed to be here. The hostess said politely that unfortunately there seemed to be some confusion about the reservation. She said it carefully, in the way of someone delivering news they have been trained to deliver without causing a scene. Thomas felt the familiar weight of the moment. He had been in versions of this moment before, not here specifically, but in rooms where the assumption ran against him before he had opened his mouth. And he had learned over 40 years exactly how much energy it costs to push back against an assumption, and exactly how much it costs to simply absorb it and move on. He was tired tonight. It had been a long week. He looked at Gracie. She was looking up at the hostess with those serious gray eyes she had gotten from her grandmother, and then she looked up at Thomas, and something in his face must have told her enough of the story, because she squeezed his hand and said quietly, "It is okay, Daddy. We can leave." And that was the moment everything changed, because from the nearest table, the one immediately to the left, a table for two set with the full crystal and linen arrangement, occupied by a single woman who had been sitting alone with a glass of red wine, and what appeared to be a substantial amount of paperwork spread carefully across the white cloth. A voice said, "Please don't leave." It was not loud. It was not a performance for the room. It was direct and clear, the voice of someone who says what they mean without rehearsing it. First, the woman at the table was somewhere in her early 40s, dark-haired, with the kind of face that was striking not because of any single feature, but because of the quality of attention in it. She was a woman who was fully present in whatever room she occupied, and right now she was fully present in this one. She was looking at Gracie. She said to Gracie, still directly, "That was a very kind thing to say to your father." Gracie studied her. The woman looked at Thomas. She said, "I am sorry to involve myself. I could not help but hear." Then she looked at the hostess. Her voice did not change its register. It stayed the same quiet, direct tone. But something in it shifted in a way that made the quality of the air in the immediate vicinity shift with it. She said, "The reservation is under Brennan, correct?" The hostess said, "Yes, but," the woman said, "Please seat them." She said it simply. The hostess looked at her. The woman returned the look with the calm of someone who has had this particular exchange before and knows exactly how it ends. The hostess said, "Of course," and that was that Thomas was shown to a table near the window. He settled Gracie into her chair and looked across at the woman, who had already returned to her paperwork with the focused efficiency of someone who has addressed a situation and moved on. He said, "Thank you." She looked up. She said, "You are welcome." He said, "I do not want to interrupt your evening." She looked at the papers spread across her table, and then at the empty chair across from her. She said, "I have been eating alone in restaurants for 15 years, Mr. Brennan," he said. "Thomas," she said, "I have been eating alone in restaurants for 15 years. Thomas, I assure you my evening is not fragile." He almost smiled. He turned back to Gracie, who was already examining the menu with the focused interest of someone encountering a document in a foreign language over the next 20 minutes, in the way that proximity and good lighting and the particular intimacy of restaurants sometimes create. A conversation developed, not a forced one, not the manufactured small talk of people who feel obligated, a real one, the kind that begins with something small and honest, and finds its own level. The woman's name was Sophia Marchetti. She was 43 years old. She ran a company that operated in 12 countries and employed just over 4,000 people. And she said this the way people state facts that have ceased to carry weight through sheer repetition. She had been in this city for a board meeting that had ended 3 hours ago, and she was flying out tomorrow morning, and she had come here because it was the closest decent restaurant to her hotel, and she had not eaten since 7 that morning. Thomas said, "Why were you still doing paperwork at 8 in the evening after a full board meeting?" She said, "Because the paperwork does not care about board meetings." He said, "What does the paperwork care about?" She looked at him. She said, "That is a strange question," he said. "I teach philosophy at a community college. It is an occupational hazard." She looked at him for a moment, then she said, "The paperwork cares about whether I have done what I said I would do. That is the only thing it ever cares about." He said, "That seems like a reasonable thing to care about." She said, "Yes." There was a pause. Gracie had ordered pasta, which the waiter had not even blinked at, and was now eating it with the careful concentration of someone who understands that the pasta is considerably better than the pasta at home, and wants to give it proper attention. Sophia was watching Gracie. She said, "How old is she?" 5. Thomas said, "She will tell you 6 if you ask her, because her birthday is in 3 weeks, and she has decided the distinction is not worth maintaining." Sophia said, "That is actually logical," he said. "I told her that she took it as full endorsement." Sophia looked at him. She said, "Where is her mother?" He said it the way he had learned to say it, after 3 years without bracing for it. He said, "She passed away. Her name was Maria. She had a heart condition we did not know about. Gracie was 2. He said it simply. Sophia did not say she was sorry in the reflexive way that people do, the 2-word phrase that means everything and nothing. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mother died when I was 7. I do not remember her the way I would like to. I remember the shape of things, but not the details." He said, "That must have been very hard." She said, "It made me someone who does not rely on things lasting. That is both a strength and a problem, depending on the day." He said, "Most true things are." She looked at him. He looked at her. Gracie looked up from her pasta. She said to Sophia, "Did you come here alone?" Sophia said, "Yes." Gracie said, "We come to places alone too. But there are 2 of us, so it is not exactly alone." Sophia said, "No, I suppose it is not." Gracie considered this and then returned to the pasta, apparently satisfied. Sophia looked at Thomas. She said, "She is remarkable," he said. "Every day she says something I have not thought of before." Sophia said, "Is that exhausting or wonderful?" He said, "Completely both." She smiled, then a real one, arriving without announcement in the way that genuine smiles do, and it changed her face in the way that a window changes a room when it is opened after a long time closed. Thomas saw it and said nothing. He filed it away in the way you file things that you do not have words for, yet they ate. They talked about his teaching, about the particular challenge of making ancient questions feel urgent to 20-year-olds who have been told by the world that urgency belongs to the practical and not the philosophical about her work, about the specific loneliness of making decisions that affect thousands of people and having very few people in your life who understand what that weight actually feels like. About Gracie's upcoming birthday, which had a theme involving horses and a level of organizational ambition that Thomas was still working out how to meet on a teacher's salary. About the restaurant they were sitting in, which was genuinely very good. and about how strange it was that the best food always tasted better in company. At some point, Gracie fell asleep in her chair. It happened the way it always happened with small children. Not gradually, not with announcement, but completely and at once, her head tilted to the side, her breathing gone slow, and even Thomas looked at her, something in his face when he looked at her. Some expression that was not performed for anyone, just the simple, private look of a man who loves his child, made Sophia go quiet for a moment. She said softly so as not to wake Gracie. "How do you do it?" he said. Do what she said, all of it, just all of it every day. He thought about this. Honestly, he said, "I do not know how to not do it. She is here, she needs me to do it, so I do it." He paused. That is the thing about having someone depend on you entirely. It removes the question of whether you feel like it. Sophia said, "Most people would find that overwhelming." He said, "Most people have not tried it." She said, "Is it lonely?" He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Yes, sometimes at 2 in the morning when she is sick and I cannot fix it, and there is nobody else to call." Yes. Then, he looked across the table at Sophia and said, "Is running a company that employs 4,000 people lonely?" She said, "Yes, at 2 in the morning when the decision cannot wait, and the weight of it is mine alone." Yes, they looked at each other, two people sitting in a well-lit restaurant in the middle of an ordinary Thursday evening, having arrived there entirely by accident, finding themselves in the unexpected vicinity of someone who understood something true about their life. Not everything, just something, but something real. Thomas said, "I should get her home." He said it without wanting to end the evening, and not knowing yet what to do with that wanting. Sophia said, "Yes." She began gathering her papers. He lifted Gracie carefully from the chair, and his daughter settled against his shoulder without waking, one hand curling instinctively into the front of his blue shirt. Sophia watched him. She said, "She knows exactly where she is, even when she is asleep." He said, "Children know where they are safe." Sophia said, "Yes, they do at the entrance," with Gracie still asleep on his shoulder. Thomas stopped. He said, "Thank you for what you did earlier," she said. "I should not have needed to do it." He said, "No," she said, "that is not your fault." He said, "I know." They stood for a moment in the warmth of the entrance, the city visible through the glass behind them, dark and lit and moving. He said, "If you are ever in this city again," she said, "I am here 4 or 5 times a year," he said. "There is a much less expensive restaurant 2 streets from here that makes better pasta than this one." She looked at him. He held her gaze with the calm of a man who is saying what he means and is comfortable waiting to see what comes back. She said, "Is that an invitation?" He said, "It is whatever you would like it to be." She was quiet for a moment, then she reached into her jacket and produced a card, not with the professional gesture of a business transaction, with the slightly different gesture of someone doing something they have decided to do and are not entirely certain about and are doing anyway. She held it out. He took it with the hand not holding Gracie. She said, "The pasta had better actually be better," he said. "It is considerably better," she said. "I will hold you to that. Thomas Brennan." She said his name the way people say a name when they are putting it somewhere they intend to keep it. He nodded. She walked back toward the restaurant, and he walked out into the evening. Gracie stirred on his shoulder. She said, without fully waking, "Daddy, did you have a good birthday?" He looked up at the sky for a moment. He thought about the evening, the entrance, and Gracie's small hand in his, and the quiet woman who had said, "Please don't leave," and the conversation that had found its own level, and the card in his pocket. He said, "Yes, sweetheart," he said, "I really did." He walked to his car through the October night. The city moved around him the way cities do, indifferent and beautiful, and full of things that are just about to happen. He drove home. He put Gracie to bed. He sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house and looked at the card. He thought about what his wife Maria used to say. She used to say that life does not hand you second chances the way stories do, all wrapped and labeled. She used to say that second chances look exactly like ordinary moments, and you only recognize them after you have either taken them or let them pass. He set the card on the table. He left it there, and in the morning it was still there, which meant he had not been dreaming, which meant the evening had been real, which meant that something that had felt for a long time like it was finished might, with no guarantees and no map and no certainty of anything, be just barely beginning again. If this story moved you, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one, and leave a comment below. Tell us about a moment that arrived without warning and changed the direction of something we read every single one.